We built places to protect them. But what if that's not enough? This is Yellowstone. The wild, protected. A masterpiece of conservation. But what if that protection ends at a line the animals can't see? In 1872, President Ulysses S. Grant signed Yellowstone into existence as the world's first national park. A radical idea at the time. A sanctuary carved out of the untamed frontier. Even today, the park harkens us back to a time when the West was still wild, where bison thundered across the plains. Wolves and coyotes hunted the Lamar Valley, and grizzlies ruled the high forests. Yellowstone was meant to protect that, a promise etched into the land. It's one of the only places in the lower 48 where you can still stand on a roadside and see a wild grizzly.
Bears, you know, existed throughout the western United States at the time of Lewis and Clark. There were perhaps 50,000 grizzly bears across the western U.S. California had more grizzlies than any other state. And with the arrival of Europeans, the first interactions with people were to kill grizzly bears. And so relentlessly they were killed. In 1981, there were perhaps 300 to 400 grizzly bears south of Canada, and they lived in less than 4% of their historic range.
It wasn't by design, but Yellowstone became their lifeboat.
Well, I mean, the only reason we had grizzly bears left in Yellowstone to save in 1975 was because we had the national park. And the fact that there were still bears in the Yellowstone ecosystem was due to Yellowstone National Park. There were almost no bears outside the park in 1975. And there were almost no bears in Grand Teton at all in 1975. So the only bears in the Yellowstone ecosystem were in the park. And we started with that core when we started the recovery program, and eventually we built out to where we have today. And that came from the survivors in that Yellowstone Park lifeboat that were still allowed to be there because grizzly bears were living in that national park.
From that fragile foothold in Yellowstone, grizzlies began to recover. The park became a sanctuary. The Endangered Species Act became a shield. And slowly, the bears came back. Today, there are likely more than 1,000 grizzlies in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, still protected under the Endangered Species Act. By nearly every biological measure, they're thriving. It's one of the great conservation success stories of our time. But the story we've been told isn't the whole story. Because protection, real protection, doesn't stop at a park boundary. And the bears don't stop there either. And when they do, the rules change. So here's the real question. What if the threat isn't out there, but in what we believe to be true? This is The Choice, a new kind of wildlife story about the lines we draw and what happens when wild animals cross them. Season 1, The Illusion of Protection, follows Yellowstone's grizzlies as they step beyond the park's invisible boundaries and forces us to confront the ones we've built in our minds. Just like in the movie The Matrix, you have the choice to take the blue pill or the red pill. Take the blue pill and believe the bears are safe, that borders are real and the park protects them. Take the red pill and see the truth about what protection really means. Welcome to The Choice. We built Yellowstone to protect the wild. A stage where the oldest dramas still play out. And on this stage, the audience is part of the performance. Tourists line the roads with cameras and cell phones, hoping to capture a glimpse of one of these elusive animals. Hoping to get close. Hoping the bears will stay close. And often they do. They've learned to tolerate us. To raise their families in our presence. To associate the roadside with safety, not danger. Bears like Snow and her two cubs, affectionately named Rain and Storm. Snow is a 10-and-a-half-year-old sow we followed for the past 3 years as she diligently raised her young. She's known by the Park Service as the 9-mile sow because her home range hugs the 9-mile marker on the road to Yellowstone's east entrance. She raised her cubs along this road, teaching them, protecting them. This year, something changed. We watched as she kicked out her 2-and-a-half-year-old cubs. Heartbreaking. Confusing. The cubs cried out. Ran down the road. Their confusion was visible. The mother they'd never been without suddenly gone. And then the dance began. Snow flirted. G288 played hard to get. But each day, they drew closer. A strange courtship, unfolding right beside the road. As word spread, the crowds grew. Tourists packed the roadside. Photographers angled for the perfect shot. As the days passed, they were rarely apart. If she wandered off, he gave chase. All of it playing out like a roadside performance. And once again, bear management had their hands full. Not just with bears, but with people. Yellowstone is a truly special place. One of the last in the lower 48 where you can see grizzlies, wolves, and other rare wildlife in their natural habitat. But the closer we get, the more we blur the boundary between wonder and risk. And while all ended well that day, what might have happened if this all took place outside the park? What lies beyond the border isn't wildness. It's risk.
Well, Yellowstone, we've got the park, and then we've got the Yellowstone ecosystem. So we've got a couple different Yellowstones. The park was, of course, highly managed and very effectively managed for bears in general and wildlife in general. And there's intensive management of bears and humans in the park. You know, human foods are secured. You get fined if you leave your food out. Lots of people to manage things like bear jams when people stop to look at animals and make sure people don't feed bears and all that kind of thing. So the park is one of the safest places to be if you're a bear. And as you move further out onto the national forest lands, which surround the park, you get multiple uses of human activity. So you get outfitters and outfitter camps. You get a lot more recreation. You get campsites, campgrounds that are not as effectively managed as they are inside the park. And then as you go beyond the national forest boundary, you get onto private lands. And on the private lands, of course, there's not a lot of regulation about what people do. And there are lots of attractants to bears in private lands, whether it's garbage or livestock carcasses or things like that that can get bears into trouble. So the further bears go from the core of the Yellowstone ecosystem, which is the national parks themselves, and we have to include Grand Teton in that, then as you get further and further out, it becomes more and more risky for bears. And eventually you get into all private land, and total 100% private land, it's very difficult for grizzly bears to live in today, because the main food they used to feed on in those places was bison and wild ungulates. And in many places now, those wild ungulates are gone, and what we have, and of course the bison are gone, and what we have is that's replaced with livestock. And grizzly bears preying on livestock is a conflict issue. We don't like to see bears preying on livestock. We try to prevent that from happening. But when it does happen, the bears do get into trouble. They either have to be captured and relocated or removed.
Inside Yellowstone, rules are clear. Enforcement is strong. Resources are abundant. But there are no fences and the gates never close. There's only a line we made up. And once a bear crosses it, everything changes. Out here, speed limits climb. Trash cans aren't always bear-proof. And the people who are supposed to show up to help, sometimes they never come. What was once safe now becomes uncertain. It looks familiar. The bears, the road, the crowd. But this time, no one's protecting them. The only difference between these two pictures is that one was taken inside the park and the other wasn't. What was watched becomes invisible. And the same behavior, seeking food, finding a roadside, existing near us, can lead to very different outcomes, based on nothing more than where their paw happened to fall. We call it wild. But the truth is, it's managed by us. And where we choose to stop managing, the wild becomes a war zone. This isn't about boundaries on a map. It's about a line we've drawn between coexistence and conflict. They crossed the line. Now, it's up to us. What will you choose? This is the choice